order.
Order number 2, communication from the chair.
Next order.
Order number 3, messages.
Next order.
Order number 4, petitions.
Next order.
Order number 5, papers.
Honorable Robert Kirwa.
Honorable Speaker, I wish to table the Land and Environment and Natural Resources Committee report on a public petition in regard to a boundary dispute between Alfred Kiblagat Koech and County Government of Nandi. I wish.
Order, Honorable Robert Kirwa, order. What is it? Proceed then. Order, members, order. You know, Honorable Robert Kirwa had made some notes on the copy that is subsequently used to table, and then realized that he will be lacking notes to use when it comes to giving notice. Otherwise, I acknowledge tabling of the Lands, Environment, Water and Natural Resources Committee report on a public petition in regard to the boundary dispute between Alfred Kiblagat Koech and the County Government of Nandi. Here in Kapsabet Ward, the same will be allocated time for discussion. Honorable Ngetich.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I also wish to table Finance and Economic Planning Committee report on the Nandi County Veterinary and Agricultural Revolving Fund Bill 2021. I beg to table.
Honorable Ngetich, you should be bowing as you cross the stage. You should not, maybe this is your first time tabling. Order, Honorable Robert Kirwa. Order. Now that we allowed you to retable the document, you cannot continue conversing in a loud. I acknowledge the tabling of the Finance and Economic Planning Committee report on the Nandi County Veterinary and Agricultural Revolving Fund Bill 2021. The same has also been allocated or scheduled time for discussion by the House Business. Honorable Ngetich.
Once more, again, Honorable Speaker, allow me on behalf of the Chair, Health and Sanitation, to table Health and Sanitation Committee report on the status of Kabiyet Sub-County Hospital, Meteitei Sub-County Hospital, and Kabunyeria Health Center. I beg to table, Speaker.
I acknowledge tabling of the Health and Sanitation Committee report on the status of Kabiyet Sub-County Hospital, Metetei Sub-County Hospital, and Kabunyaria Health Center. The same also has been scheduled for discussion by House Business Committee. Honorable Hilary Serem.
Honorable Speaker, I rise to table the report of the Public Investments and Accounts Committee on the Auditor General's report on the operations of Kapsabet Nandi Water and Sanitation Company, Kanawasco, for the period ended 30th June 2018. To table.
I acknowledge the tabling of the report of the Public Investment and Accounts Committee on the Auditor General's reports on Kapsabet Water and Sanitation Company, Kanawasco. As of 30th June 2018, the same will be scheduled for discussion by House Business. All the reports herein table, members, for your own consumption and perusal for purposes of the debate. Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Honorable Cynthia Muge.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I rise to give notice of motion on equipping of the ward administrators with gadgets for them to use in discharging their duties.
Honorable Robert Girwa.
Honorable Speaker, I wish to give a notice of motion on the report on a public petition on regarding to a boundary dispute between Alfred Kiblagat Koech and County Government of Nandi.
Honorable Ngetich.
Thank you again, Honorable Speaker. I wish to give a notice of motion on Finance and Economic Planning Committee report on the Nandi County Veterinary and Agricultural Revolving Fund Bill 2021.
Honorable Serem.
Honorable Speaker, I rise to give a notice of motion that this House do adopt the report of the Public Investment and Accounts Committee on the Auditor General's report on the operations of Kapsabet Nandi Water and Sanitation Company, Kanawasco, for the period ended 30th June 2018.
Honorable Ngetich.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I also give a notice of motion on Health and Sanitation Committee report on the status of Kabiyet Sub-County Hospital, Metetei Sub-County Hospital, and Kabunyaria Health Center.
Fair enough. Next order.
Order number 7, statements.
Next order.
Order number 8, motion.
Honorable Charles Jacob Mayo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I stand to move a motion on gender-based violence policy. Some members may think that it's the same policy as in the morning. That was a child protection policy. But this one is gender-based violence. Mr. Speaker, allow me to move. So let us go to number 4, page 4. Honorable Speaker, the Nandi County-based gender-based violence policy was tabled on 22nd April 2020. It was committed to the Committee of Tourism, Culture, Gender, and Social Welfare for deliberations. The committee, at its subsequent sittings, sieved through the policy and made necessary recommendations. Honorable Speaker, as you are aware, Kenya is a signatory to the international human rights instruments and standards like Millennium Development Goals, MDGs, UN Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, Convention Against Torture, and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, Protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, on rights of women in Africa, among others. These instruments are already enshrined in our Constitution. The instruments obligate the government to put in place measures to address sexual and gender-based violence. Consequently, Kenya has put in place provisions for laws and policy documents, including the Sexual Offense Act 2006, the National Policy on Gender and Development, and national guidelines on management of sexual violence in Kenya. The shift in government structure brought about by the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution fundamentally changed the structure of government. The introduction of the national and county government called for a coordinated approach in the formulation and operation of policies and other legal frameworks. The proposed Nandi County government policy on gender-based violence provides a framework for sustained advocacy campaign against sexual and gender-based violence. According to the 2014 Kenya Demographic Health Survey, 45% of women in Kenya aged 15 to 49 have experienced either physical or sexual violence. Common forms of sexual and gender-based violence are domestic violence, rape, defilements, abduction, sexual exploitation, disinheritance, abandonment, and other forms of intra-family conflicts. Nandi County is following in the footsteps of Migori and Meru counties who have already developed and adopted a policy to combat sexual and gender-based violence. The policy provides a framework for the implementation of concrete measures in prevention and response to sexual and gender violence. Policy objectives: to put in place a relevant policy, legislative and regulatory framework to create a facilitative environment for responding, preventing, and managing sexual and gender-based violence matters in the county. To put in place a sexual and gender-based violence prevention environment and implementation of anti-sexual harassment at the workplace policy and reduction of vulnerability of groups at risk of gender-based violence management, psychosocial support, rehabilitation, and reintegration of perpetrators back to the community. The need to increase access to quality and comprehensive response and support services across sectors, facilitate the establishment and strengthening of existing safe spaces, and improving accountability for sexual gender-based violence. To build coordination and monitoring systems and improving data collection on sexual gender-based violence with relevant stakeholders and explore areas for cooperation. Committee observations. There is stigma arising from most forms of violence. Victims of sexual and gender-based violence shy away from reporting rape of both genders, and the male gender especially is highly stigmatized. The seeming lack of official data in respect of sexual and gender-based violence in Nandi does not translate to the non-existence of gender-based violence, but rather the lack of reporting. reporting mechanisms and guarantees and safeguard the victim's privacy and dignity. There is notable discrimination regarding the response to sexual and gender-based violence. It emerged that more efforts have been directed towards the female gender at the expense of the male gender, who are also victims of violence, but are too scared of coming out due to stigma associated with the male victims. Committee recommendations. The policy may give a chance to the traditional justice system, which then coordinated and entrenched in the country's judicial system, which give a quick accessible, uses local language, cost-effective, and alive to local traditions and norms, and are enforced by people who are known to the litigants. Further, unlike the formal justice system, it offers restorative justice rather than restrictive. The policy should provide avenues where health workers, providers in health centers, health facilities are trained on gender-based violence, on the collection of medical samples and evidence processing whenever they encounter cases of gender-based violence. Most of the perpetrators of the gender-based violence are let scot-free by the courts where the evidence samples were contaminated at the point of collection. A coordinated chain of events between the county hospitals, investigative and prosecutorial agencies will be able to fill the gaps. Concerted efforts to fight the stigma, especially where intrafamily conflicts are involved. Survivors of incest, marital rape, domestic violence may sensitize people to come out and talk about these issues and create a favorable environment to combat the vice. To include in the policy, generation of reports, yearly or otherwise, on all forms of gender-based violence, and such reports should include all available data on the incidence of each form of violence and the effects of such violence on the victims. To include in the policy reporting system through reports showing information and legal preventive measures that have been taken to overcome violence against women and the effectiveness of such measures. As you can see, the members there they have signed. So I want to ask I'm not seeing my members today. Jane, can you stand up to second? Okay, thank you.
Honorable Jane, you need to bow as a sign of you stood and you didn't make najua class ni kama vile unaingia kwa assembly. Ukifika hapo unafaa kufanya. Oh yes, that is it now. Honorable Jane Chepkoech has seconded the motion. I therefore wish to propose that the motion as moved by Honorable Charles Jacob Mayo and seconded by Honorable Jane Chepkoech on the committee report on gender-based violence policy be discussed. Honorable Teresa Mayo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this chance to make my comments on the report by the Committee on Tourism, Culture, Gender and Social Welfare for the numerous policies that they are making, more so for the Department on Culture, Gender related issues. I would like to first and foremost thank the committee for the recommendations they have made It is clear, Honorable Speaker, that the world, and more so maybe Africa, patriarchy is deeply rooted in our culture, and despite the fact that we are in the 21st century and that education has taken root, it hasn't been fully a liberation attempt for the women. At times you wonder, Honorable Speaker, whether at one point we will be able to achieve respect, to achieve at least the humanitarian aspect of being male or female in a natural justice. Because, Honorable Speaker, we are born, no one has ever chosen their sexes in the world. Unless, of course, we have people, those people who are male, female in one as a person, of which those are the only category that at times, although they have also been unfairly either mutilated or unfairly treated, like the Semenyas and the likes. Honorable Speaker, it's unfortunate that despite the fact that every family has a male and a female in their families, treatment has never been the same. We are seeing the gender-based violence not like an everyday thing. We have those which are very severe. We have others which are hidden. We have others which, most of them are hidden. And some of them may be due to the fact that most of the women have accepted some of these violences as a normal day-to-day practice. That is why possibly perpetrators go unnoticed, because it has been the order of life to be sexually violated. In that, it may mean, like we have seen, the very normal majority of the cases, like disinheritance, abandonment, sexual exploitation, domestic violence, rape and defilement. Most women, and possibly men, have accepted as a bare minimum to be sexually exploited, to be disinherited. Most women, you will find them leaving their matrimonial homes, leaving all the property, and running away as a normal aspect. Like some who have lost their husbands have also lost property. So there are so many things that happen to women. And I want to believe that when this policy comes into place, maybe Nandi will be a better place for such victims of gender-based violences to happen. Honorable Speaker, in normal circumstances, or in the cases we have seen, at some point we had to travel with Honorable Clara, Honorable Cynthia, to Kabiyet to help a victim where the girl had been raped. And unfortunately, the mother was the only person who was pushing for the rights of this girl. The father, unfortunately, had colluded with the perpetrator to at least harmonize kienyeji. I want to bring that, and I put to quote, that the man pays something to the other man and things were settled out of court. Of course, regardless of the child's rights, regardless of the feelings of even the other parent. So in most cases, and this is almost a normal circumstance, and when you reach court, you find that the other men in the system, maybe the lawyers, the advocates, who most of them are men, will somehow sympathize with the perpetrator who is another man. So honestly, I feel this policy should include another recommendation that will curb interference of gender-based violence from being heard in court. And also, another recommendation should be that the children's department or the department should have lawyers in place ready to help the victims in court, so that we have the law being followed to the letter. I'm happy at the police stations we have a gender desk. Maybe that desk should be involved during cases related to gender-based violence. So I hope the committee can include a few of those recommendations so that at least most of these cases will not be interfered by friends to the perpetrators. It could be possible we have feelings, and as women, every other time we see such a case, even on social media, we feel like mutilating the perpetrator. So likewise, maybe the men have a soft spot for the victims. So we want to strike a balance in this policy, that at least we have representations of these violated cases. So I support this report, and I want to believe that implementation and procedurally another bill will come in place so that women can at least have their rights protected, and not only protecting, but also sensitization some women rights. I don't know which word, education on women rights should be done to the women so that they get to know. There are those women who could be getting violated every night because they don't know it's their right to express their feelings. I want to believe all the women in this assembly understand what I mean. So that we really want the women to know that they have a right to say yes and no, even in the family structure. Thank you.
Why only women? What about the men in the? What about the men in the assembly?
You don't know.
You should have enlightened us. No, I don't want any.
Honorable
any
Speaker,
further.
are you asking a question that you feel?
Unless you have not concluded your remarks.
No, I'm about to conclude, but by you interfering, I feel I should come back to at least make some enlightenment. Of course, well, if there are men who are tortured, then you also are men. You should also be assisted. But actually, the place should be friendly for all of us. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Serem.
Honorable Speaker, I rise also to support the report as brought by the committee. Mr. Speaker, it is true that the world now faces challenges, a number of them. One of the most serious ones to social injustice is sexual and gender-based violence. The reason being, sometimes victims are affected without a reprimand of the perpetrator. Now, a number of factors may have resulted to that, one of which could be the absence of a policy. Now, with this policy then, Mr. Speaker, it will be easier and a bit manageable to handle such cases and ensure that justice is done, injustice is eliminated, and that we live in a society that is habitable to everyone. Mr. Speaker, the other day I was traveling in a matatu to somewhere. It was very early in the morning, and we had to rush to catch the early matatu. One of the passengers was a lady, and as we went along, we started talking, and she said she left home a bit early. And when she met a man on the way, and the man stood when she saw that this was a lady and tried to harass the lady. The lady stood and said, in quotes, "Habari we mwanaume, unasemaje?" And the man took off. Mr. Speaker, just because this was a lady, this person thought it would be easy to harass being the wee hours of the morning. Now, on the other hand, we have heard also men who have been abused in the family. Mr. Speaker, again, when I was a student in the university, I took one of the matatus to school. And there was jam, and it was late in the evening. A man who is aged, around 40-something years, took his phone and called the wife and said, oh, I'm sorry, Jane, it's getting late, I will be late. Mr. Speaker, the tone surprised us in the vehicle. It was a tone that was it was sending a message that I ought to have been home early, failure to which I will face consequences. Mr. Speaker.
Are you purporting that if you notify your wife that you will be late is a form of gender-based violence? Or what do you mean, Honorable Hilary Serem?
Mr. Speaker, these things, they require a lot of interpretation to be understood. But that one, Mr. Speaker, the way that man passed the message, everybody looked at him and said, oh, it was a message like, if I delay, I'll have to answer where I was. Mr. Speaker, I support this motion. I am only concerned when I saw the definition of terms as defined by the policy. There is one definition that says defilement. And the policy says it is any act that causes penetration into the genital organ of a child. I mark the word penetration. That one seems to be biased towards girls because it's a child. I do not know if a boy is defiled, what will be the actual act, because I do not see a penetration into the boy's genital organ. So I would suggest that together with the amendments that have been recommended by the committee, the originators of the policy to still scrutinize with a view to eliminate any biasness in terminologies and even in the report. Because, Mr. Speaker, whereas the policy says gender-based violence is cross-sectional, both sexes, that definition you cannot convince me that will be applying for a boy. Mr. Speaker, by and large, I want to support this report. Thank you.
judging by the mood, I proceed to now put the question that this House adopts the Tourism, Culture, Gender and Social Welfare Committee report on gender-based violence policy. Will as many as of similar opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 9, adjournment.
This House stands adjourned until the next normal sitting.